Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Hometown History. I'm Jamie.
I'm Dami.
And we are at the Blue Sky Tavern tonight. So we are both live, but we also have a live audience. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Round of applause. So a little bit about me. I'm a high school history teacher, and I got my doctorate in American Studies from Penn State. And I write two blogs. One's called Wandering in York County, and the other one is Witnessing York.
And I am a Third Circuit Court of Appeals librarian and a history nerd, Civil War reenactor, and the founder of Preserving the History of Newburytown. And I have 2 cookbooks out, so go buy them on Amazon.
So a couple months ago, Dami and I got together and we decided, along with Jim McClure, to start these YouTube videos where we talk about local history. And our goal is to just get you more excited about things that happened in your own backyard. So tonight, our story is called Miller's Tales. 360 mills spun, well-watered York County. So this is a tribute to the late Lila Foreman Shaw. She wrote this book, and it is phenomenal. It includes so much information about the history of mills in York County. She is no longer with us, but all the work that she did with her history research still impacts us today.
And if you're looking for more resources on mills in York County, go to the Redland Community Library. Karen Hostetter, the director, has made an amazing book display. So go there, check it out, and you can check out books about mills in York County. But to start off, we're going to highlight 4 really important aspects. We're going to talk about dual purposes, food and society, knowledge of the land, changing with the times, and women entrepreneurs as far as it goes with mills in York County.
Yeah. So here is our agenda for tonight. These are our 4 takeaways.
Yeah.
So flour. That's why we're here.
Uses it.
Yeah.
I love carbs.
She's Italian.
I'm Italian. Pasta, bread. During the pandemic, I baked so much bread. I was like, if the apocalypse is coming, I'm going to be well fed. I have a bread maker. We made bread. There was a run on yeast. I couldn't find yeast.
Yeah,
but I could find flour.
Yeah, flour. So we just want to highlight how much you eat that has flour in it. A lot of us take for granted all of the cookies and cakes and pies and breads and pastas and all the delicious things. So what we're sitting here tonight, this used to be a flour mill.
Yeah.
So when you think back to William Penn, he is our founder. Actually, today in history was when the first Pennsylvanians settled the area from Germany. Yeah,
oh,
isn't
that's
that
cool.
interesting? Yeah.
We didn't plan that.
Well, initially, when he set up Pennsylvania, he decided that he was going to have the complete rights to all the grist mills and sawmills and also water rights. But luckily for us, it didn't work. We've always been a lot of rule breakers, and we didn't listen. So luckily, by the time the 1700s came around, York was able to develop our own mills. We didn't have to listen to those silly laws that William Penn set up the whole way over in Philadelphia. So let's get into the first most important lesson that we want you to take away from today. That is that flour mills were the center of society. They're where farmers went and took their crop. Just to put it in perspective of how important this was, so if you were a farmer in the 17 and 1800s, you didn't have grocery stores right down the road. You didn't have areas where you could go buy your food. You had to grow it yourself. So a lot of people think that they were 100% self-sustaining, but they weren't. There was a lot of trade going on, commerce, working together, but overall, people still grew a lot of their own food, and a big part of that was flour. And so these flour mills where farmers came and brought their product to, that is where they were able to mill it down and actually be able to use it. Mm-hmm. So, how important were they? If you look at, so the York County History Center, they have an amazing journal. Here is the latest edition.
Jamie's in it.
Oh, you should all go get it and read my article. So we looked at an article that came out a couple years ago. Actually, I think it was 10 years ago now. And the man did some research on the top manufacturing industries in York County. And you can see here that wheat was number 2. That is how important it was to York County. And this was in 1810. And so when we think about people here in Newburytown and how populous it was.
Yeah, it was a pretty poppin' place, like you like to say. So right now in Newbury Township, there's probably about 14,000 people. So think about expansion and the population that there is today. So I mean, 45.8, that's a lot.
Yeah, per square mile, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just for you to see visually, because this is how a lot of us learn, if you look at this map here, you can see where we are.
York County.
Yep.
Newburytown.
Yeah. And we were a pretty populated area. So,
lots of farms.
Yeah, lots of farms. Okay, so if you're looking for a light read, this right here.
It's not thick or anything.
This is a Pennsylvania Agriculture and Country Life. This was a large part of my dissertation looking at agriculture in York County. And in it, I found this amazing quote where the author looked at kids and how if you're a kid in York County in the 1800s, you worked on the farm.
Right.
You maybe went to a one-room schoolhouse until
Eighth grade.
About 8th grade, yeah. And so you didn't have a lot of playtime. You went to church on Sundays, and you hung out with your brothers and sisters, and that's it. So when it was time for Dad to take the wheat to the mill, it was like party time. Everyone hopped in the carriage. They took the horse and carriage to the mill, and it was a time for them to hang out with their friends, gossip, hang out. I mean, it was the highlight of the year for them.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. And so along with that, the mill keepers, they were very smart people. While they were there, the farmers getting their wheat ground, they turned a lot of their mills into inns so people could stay, spend the night, and continue the conversation. And really that's what we're doing here. So just again, take a second. We are in a mill, and we are together, and we are enjoying each other's company through fellowship, enjoying some food and some alcohol. And it's exactly what they were doing 200 years ago in this exact same place.
Not much has changed.
Yeah.
We like to think it has, but it really hasn't.
So then that brings us to our second most important lesson, and that is not only looking at mills as a place of society and gathering, but also how important water was. So famous anthropologists would say that water is magic, and that is what ran this entire mill. So looking at just how knowledgeable these people had to be in York County. So imagine you are in the 1700s, you're traversing York County,
Right.
You're seeing the beautiful hills. Okay, favorite parts about York County? Like, what's your most beautiful place to go that you think is just gorgeous?
I love Newburytown.
Oh, you
that
suck
was a
up.
dumb
You suck
question.
up. So I love going to like Gifford Pinchot and the beautiful ponds and the creeks and the streams that we have,
That's
and
true,
the mountains and hilltops, right? So these settlers came and they saw the beauty, but they also saw opportunity.
Right, yeah.
So they were thinking about how they were going to build these mills. And again, there's this assumption that farmers are like simple-minded. The exact opposite, okay? You're going to construct this mill, and you have to think about how fast the water is running,
Right.
the water tables, the pitch, what kind of trees are around, if there's boulders in your way,
Right.
because what would happen if you messed up?
You're going to lose money.
I mean,
It's
like,
not going to work.
years of your time and thousands of dollars. So I just want to take a second to appreciate the people who built this mill took so much time to do their research and really read the land. I think a lot of us get caught up in modernity and we just want to drive to work and check our emails and turn on TV at night. And how often do you take a second and just look up at the clouds or look at the moon and the stars or stop and observe a creek? Raise your hand if you've been to Gifford Pinchot in the past year. Past year?
Everybody.
Okay, good. So we have some environmentalists. Awesome. So our settlers, the people who built these mills, took the time to look at the water, to observe it, so they knew how they could build a mill that would be successful and profitable.
They had it down to a science. Yeah, and if you want to know how gristmill works, I am not a gristmill worker, but I have a diagram that'll tell you how gristmill works. But I mean, you can see it's complicated, and for someone that didn't have maybe schooling up till 12th grade, someone who didn't have the internet, someone who didn't have access to a ton of books. I mean, this was pretty complicated stuff, and they were able to come up with it being rural workers. Because we really were. We were a rural community in York County.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It wasn't until actually between the 1960s and 1970s that York County switched from being agriculture to mostly urban. Anyone want to guess when the rest of the country switched from being agriculture to urban? What decade? I've heard 40s as a guess. It was 1920s the switch. So York County was 40 years after the rest of the country.
Right.
Yep, we
so
stuck
this
to
was,
it.
Yeah, so those was complicated stuff.
Yep.
No joke.
Agricultural roots.
Yeah, and it's like we were saying up here, it's renewable, it's sustainable, and it's clean.
Yep. Using their own kinetic energy around them to get this beautiful energy. So
That's you.
that is me. How did you know? Yes. Millstones. So back in that diagram, not only are we pulling in water water from the surrounding creeks and streams to be able to run these mills, but we also dug in the ground to pull out stones to be able to use those stones to grind the flour. So these millstones are on average 3 to 7 feet in diameter.
Yeah, they're no joke.
Yeah, and if you see it's a picture of me to get a comparison. I've reached out to Jerry Jones. Has anyone seen Jerry Jones, geologist in York County? All right, he is phenomenal. He knows so much about the rocks that are in the area. And I said, what were the types of rocks that would have been used in a York County mill? And he said that it would have been conglomerate. That would have been the stones that they would have put together. And what's interesting is that he was telling me about a quarry that was right down the road from here. It was only 10 miles away. And so presumably that stone that you all pass, again, in your cars every day, when you leave tonight, take a second, look at that millstone, realize that it came 10 miles away. You talk about local sourcing.
Right, yeah.
I mean, the things, you know how all your shirts say made in where? Made from which country? China, usually. Right? Yeah, no, things are from York County. Right here. We were so self-sufficient.
We were.
Yep.
Okay, so we're in the Blue Sky Tavern, and it was a grist mill. So this building was built in 1835, and it was a grist mill, and it was fed from water from the east branch of the Fishing Creek. So, you know, we have Fishing Creek Elementary School. We have Red Mill Road. We have Red Mill Elementary School. So it was first the Bear Mill or Prowse Mill, and they made flour here. And then if you think about it, from 1835 until now, it's been continuously operating as a business. So first it was a grist mill, then it was the Red Mill Inn, then there was the Jolly Coppersmith, Casey Klingers, Arugas, the Field House. Now we're at the Blue Sky Tavern. So this is a perfect example of reuse. So I'm really passionate about the fact that preserving history in Newberrytown means that we're gonna have to keep older buildings. So in America, we have the mentality that we want to demolish old buildings. So you're gonna drive around Newberrytown, you're gonna drive around Newberry Township, Fairview Township, and you're gonna see new construction. You're gonna see townhouses, condos, newer houses. But we have to think in a more European mentality. If you think of Europe, it's so old compared to America. They're incorporating their older architecture into everyday life. So you might go to a building in Europe that's 500 years old and it could be a pharmacy. You're sitting in a building that was built in 1835. Now a lot has changed. There's vinyl siding, there's been additions put on, it's been repointed.
Wait, this TV isn't from the 1800s?
No, this wasn't around back then. Sorry. But, you know, it's amazing that we're sitting in a building that it's like a cat with 9 lives. We're reusing something, and it's the bare bones, it's the soul of 1835. And we're not demolishing it, we're using it. And it might not be on the National Historical Register, it might not be pristine, it might not be a museum, but we're reusing it, and we're here and we're living in history. And I think that's what's important, and that's what I want the people of Newberrytown to understand, is we have an amazing township, we have an amazing village. Let's use some of the older structures
and to live in.
Yeah, to live in them, to operate a business out of. You know, we can reuse things. It's like reuse, recycle. You know, we don't have to rip things down. We can still operate out of them. I know, like, these lights don't work over here because they can't find the light
electrical circuit.
Yeah, they don't know if they're hooked up or not because they were like, we're still getting used to being in a building that was built in 1835.
Yeah.
But that's the charm of the place. I mean, you come down here and you realize that this was a working grist mill and you're sitting in history.
Yep.
So I think that's really important. And a lot of these pictures that we're showing you, they were either pulled from local people that shared them or people that used to work here when it was different restaurants, and they were on the Blue Sky Tavern Facebook page.
Yeah. And also my friends are tired of going to museums. So thank you all for coming to a bar tonight. So glad you could drink and also learn about history.
I mean, if you're going to go to a place that is, you're sitting in history and it serves you alcohol, like, it's a win-win.
So that brings us to our fourth and final lesson, and that is that for the time it was mostly run by men. However, there were a few women entrepreneurs. So we're going to highlight the Wallace Cross Mill that's down in Crossroads. So it was originally built in 1826 by this guy named Alexander Wallace, and in 1861 he passed He left it to his 4 children, 2 daughters, Eleanor and Mary. They bought the other 2 kids out, and they started running this business. So here are the picture of the sisters. One of the sisters, her name is Mary, and while she was working in one of the turbines, her sleeve got caught, and her arm became mutilated, and it was never be able to use again. And you can see in this image, they had to amputate it, and she had to work with only one arm. And we wanted to highlight this because, not only did men have a hard time that's very unsafe, but also now we have women that are also working in these mills that are also having a challenge here. So again, in the journal article that we pulled where a lot of this information came from, there was this great picture that I loved from the, from one of the mills in the area. And at the bottom there was this quote that just spoke to me. It said, "The mills menaced the simple farmers' limbs and lives." So every day these people were going to work and they were risking their lives, their livelihood, but then also their limbs as well. So Mary, put ourselves in her perspective, it's 1870. As a woman, she is now disabled, which now it's difficult to live being disabled, but back then, you didn't have prosthetics, you didn't have ADA to make sure that you were protected, and so she had to be a survivor, really to fight for herself.
Absolutely.
She was also considered crippled, which at the time, and again, that she had to live in a subservient role, that she was almost pitied, right, instead of looked at as someone that's respectable from the community. It was also before women's suffrage, so women didn't have the right to vote, so she had really no political clout. So Mary...
She was a second-class citizen.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, and so this picture here, if you look at it, okay, Jim pointed this out to us. Have you ever seen in old pictures how they have to hold themselves in a very certain way for a long period of time because that's how long it took them to be able to develop the image? Notice how they position her body, her arm. Is it faced away from the camera or is it faced towards the camera?
She's showing it off.
Yeah. Mary is saying, look, I lost my arm at work in this mill, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it. You're not going to put me down because of my arm. Here it is. Now, of course, it's still hidden, which I think at the time was just a level of appropriateness, what would be considered acceptable to see in a photograph. But we just love how proud Mary is, and she's not with us today, but that's why we want to go back and celebrate her. So for years, these women also weren't recognized in any of the business journals, and that includes the Cocker's American Flour Mill and the Mill Furnish Directory, and in fact, every single York County publication omitted them, and they did not include both of these women.
So they were doing all the work, but they didn't get any of the recognition.
Yep. And it wasn't until 1915 that they were recognized.
Yeah, so these women were really pioneers of their time. It took a lot of independence to be a woman, to stand up for yourself and to put yourself in a man's role and to say, I'm going to take over this business, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, because you didn't inherit things back then. You couldn't vote, you didn't have a say in your local politics or national politics. So it took a lot of gusto to be a woman, to own your own business and to not only own it but operate it by yourself. So the two sisters, they really, they were really cool women for the time period. Yeah, and then today, thankfully, they're getting their due, and they might not be here, but I hope their souls know that the Women's Business Center organization in York County is really saying, these women were entrepreneurs, and they were local entrepreneurs, and we're going to give them their due. And if you go on the website, you can learn about them.
So thankfully, thank you for York County Economic Alliance. Shout out to them for recognizing fabulous lady business owners. Any lady business owners in the house tonight? Yay! Yay! Good job, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the Fitz wheel from Hanover. So this is another York County local invention. So water wheels were usually wooden, and the Fitz company did make wooden water wheels. There were farmers that, even though there were progressions, they were like, no, the wooden water wheel works for me, I'm going to stick with it. So that was about 70% effective, according to the Fitz company. So they decided, well, we can make that better. 70% isn't good enough. So they made a metal water wheel, and it was 90% effective. And that was made in Hanover by the Fitz water wheel company.
which just really speaks to York County. I mean, can you name anything that used to be made in York County? Does anyone want to shout out anything that was made here? False craft paper, peppermint patty, good.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Oregon rifles, I hear? Flintlock rifles, yeah.
Ciders of Hanover.
Coffee, yeah. Good.
Yeah, there was a lot that came out of York County.
Yep.
The Pullman car.
Pullman, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
The ice. Oh, see, okay. Just take a second. Look how many things were made right here.
Yeah.
And one of them was the Fitz waterwheel, and it was sold up and down the East Coast, getting again this.
And it made it all the way to Minnesota.
Really?
I don't know if you know that. Yeah, I was looking today. I was trying to do some research for this episode, and they were talking about there was a college in Minnesota that worked with engineering,
Yeah.
and they used the Fitz waterwheel.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Go Hanover.
Yeah, it was like a study for their students. So I thought that was really amazing.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, as we're bringing our presentation to a close tonight, as you already know, the end of the story, gristmills did fall out of popularity. They are no longer with us. And a big part of the reason is because we didn't like the brand in our flour. Does anybody like whole wheat? Please? Okay.
Okay, so we have some healthy people in the audience.
So same with back then, about 150 years ago, what they were finding is the flour, as it was grinding in the millstone, the bran wouldn't completely separate from the flour.
It was too gritty.
It was gritty. Now, it was very nutritious and it was good for you, but about this time period, people are going to be wanting that Wonder Bread, perfect bleached, beautiful white flour that doesn't have that kind of gritty taste to it. We also have innovation, so electricity, mechanization, this innovation that happened all throughout the Industrial Revolution is going to replace the gristmill. And today, this is what it looks like. Part of me loves that it's clean and sterile, and that I know that what I'm getting isn't going to hurt me, but on the other hand, it kind of loses that charm of the gristmill and the wheels that were turning and the water that was a part of it all, and the community that also gathered there. I'm sure there's no community that are gathering in this current place. And just to put it in perspective, how much these machines took over the grist mills, if you look at a bag of flour, in 1872, it cost $7.50 for a bag of flour, but in 1898, it went down to $2.25. So these farmers simply could not keep up with the paying for things because they weren't getting paid, they weren't getting compensated. And so they were losing money. And eventually we have these family farms that just said, I cannot afford to keep doing this. And we still see this today. We see family farms that cannot keep up with the mega farms and that can overproduce because of mechanization.
I just bought a bag of flour the other day at Walmart. If you buy Walmart brand flour, you're going to get it for like $4 cheaper than if you buy organic, like handmade flour from an organic farm, family-owned farm.
Yep.
So it's a shame, but it's reality.
Well, and that's why there are some businesses around New York that you can purchase local, and you are going to spend more money, but you do know that you're getting a better product, and you are supporting your people that live right down the street.
It's worth it.
Yep.
100%.
So, like we started this presentation, there were 360 mills in York County, and we have done a complete 360.
We're still sitting in a mill.
Yeah, just like the water wheel, turn the whole way around. So, we're back at the beginning. So, we just want you to leave with these takeaways here.
Yeah, we hope you learned something. Hopefully.
So here are 4 lessons, and that brings us then, we're going to have another episode.
Yeah, so this is episode 2 in our fall series, but we're going to go for more episodes. So next episode is going to be about the Old Trail. So the Old Trail connects us to DC. So it used to be the Old York Road. It's known to us as the Old Trail, and it's an essential road for us. I mean, you can't go anywhere in Newburytown without probably taking the Old Trail. So that'll be next month.
And you and I both live off of it.
We live off of the Old Trail, yeah. We patronize businesses that are on the Old Trail.
The Old Trail right there, right?
Yeah, the Old Trail is right out front, so you can't miss it.
We hope that you join us our next one, but at this time, our live presentation, as far as Dami and I speaking at you, is over. But this is called Hometown History for a reason. A part of Dami and I's mission is to get you interested in history as well. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, and instead of us talking at you, we're going to ask if you have anything that you want to share as far as personal stories that you might have. But also, Dami did some research on Facebook, trying to post out there if anybody's interested in sharing about if you've worked here at this time or knew someone that worked here, Or even, I mean, if you grew up in the area, you may have seen it change over time. So any of those memories, we'd love if you could share out. So, do I have to call on you, or are we going to have volunteers?
Don't make it awkward.
Our daughter worked here when it was Casey Clean.
Their daughter worked here when it was Casey Clingers. What was your daughter's name?
Katie Dorr, but now she's Katie Taylor.
Katie Taylor, and she's in Virginia, right?
Yes, she's Dorr.
And she's a member of the Preserving the History of Newberrytown group. I love it. We're all the way in Virginia, you guys. I love it. Anyone else?
York County has the oldest continuous operating flour mill in the country.
Which mill is it?
It used to be the York Roller Mill, now it's ConAgra. But
ConAgra.
They've been in operation the longest in the country.
Thank you,
They
Dennis.
also were taken over by the Confederate Army during the Civil War. And the Confederates made flour there when they were occupying York County.
Okay, interesting.
Still in operation today. It's in Manchester Township.
No longer run by the Confederates. Thank you. Thank you. Dennis is my cousin. Anybody else? Jim.
What,
Oh, no.
why are there so many mills in York County?
There's so many mills in York County was the question, and that's because of our access to water. We have the Susquehanna, and then we have so many offshoots of local creeks and streams. So this mill was fed by the East Branch of Fishing Creek, and actually what is now the parking lot and their outside like picnic area, beer garden, used to be the holding pond. So they
Yeah.
diverted the water straight from Fishing Creek into a holding pond and was now their parking lot. So thank you, York County, for being right along the Susquehanna.
We really did have the perfect marriage of beautiful soil that was rich and fertile, but then also waterways that made it irrigation possible, but then also for us to harness that energy. So again, when you add these two things, fertile farmland with water that is accessible, I mean, the only thing you need then is people to actually grow the flour and
Right.
then build the flour mill. What was that? If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Right.
Flour mills.
I don't think it was about flour mills, but
Baseball?
we'll make our own version.
Yeah, why not? Our Newberrytown version of it, they go. It will come. Anyone else?
Does anybody remember when it was the giant, they didn't know it, when they had all the copper all over? Big, yeah, wasn't it beautiful? Remember the big pot? Yeah, big copper pot.
There was a big copper pot here.
It's all antique copper.
Oh, that's cool.
And did they sell it, or it was just decorated? Okay. Oh man.
Question in the back.
So I know York County has been around, for a long time, but like did bringing these mills in really boost the population, or did that take a long time until the 60s and 70s of the 1900s?
So your question is, did the mills increase population directly? Is there a direct correlation?
By a lot, yeah.
Okay. Well, we would have to look at the population data. So if York, one of the first, so York was founded, the city down in the borough in 1749. And then if you look at the population graphs, well, you might as well go back and look at it. It was a pretty steady increase.
Right.
Sorry, it's giving everybody a seizure. Okay. So there you can see what the population looked like across York County. And this was in 1810, so this was 200 years ago.
Right.
And we've seen a steady increase. I would have to look at exact population graphs, but I don't know if we can find a direct correlation between the two. It would be interesting to find out though. Yeah.
Did you guys have a question?
Question, comment. When it was the red mill in, after it had been done being a mill, they still had a nice pond back here where your parking lot is a beer garden. So as kids, we would go fishing back here or ice skating.
Oh, okay.
It was a popular place to be used.
Yeah, there was a few people on the Facebook page when I brought this topic up a few months ago. A lot of people said that they fished back there with their dads, or it was like a cool place until they paved
Yeah.
over it, unfortunately.
So what was that? So I was born in 1990, and Dami was
94.
yeah. So she's a little younger. So what was it like then in York County when they paved over the pond? Was it sadness? Were people upset? Or was it respect out of private property that they can do what they want with their business? So in other words, what was the public sentiment?
Just happened.
Yeah. Anyone remember what it was like when they paved over? No? It must not have been that important then.
I don't even remember when they did it.
Yeah.
I don't know when they made it. I can remember when they were on it.
Okay.
But I can't remember when they paved over.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Repeat.
So we're not 100% sure when it was paved over. Yep. Yep. Okay. Yes, question.
My grandparents' farm out in Strinestown, there was a rock about the size of a small car that had pockets, nice round smooth pockets in it. And my grandpa always told me that the Indians did their corn in the pockets of that rock.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Like a mortar and pestle style.
Right, yeah. And I'm really glad that you brought that up with Indigenous Peoples Day coming up relatively soon, recognizing that these mills were not the first people who performed agriculture in this area. We were talking about Native Americans that were here for hundreds of years before the first European settlers came here and built these mills. Yeah, and some would argue that it was a lot more sustainable and renewable than what the mills were too. That's good. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Do we have a question in the back? Yes, yes.
So how about shout out to your brother, Alan Tyson, for working in an industry with water as their power source from way back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Industry here too.
Yeah, water is very important.
It is.
No?
Jim?
Great.
What, with all the mills, that meant there was mill dams, and were there any downsides to the environment with these dams?
Jim is asking about the environmental impact of dams when it comes to mills.
Yeah, so I was under the misconception that dams would take the water and divert it and not completely mess up the ecosystem. Well, I was wrong. These dams, unfortunately, did the mills, when they built the water system, they would take the entire thing and funnel it to maximize the input that would go over the water wheel. They did not think about the migratory fish in the area, shad, that we have here. They did not think about the ecology. And you could argue that it may be better than other forms of energy because you're not going to have much pollution from it, and there's not going to be much like after waste from it. However, they did not consider the fish that were from the area. Now, luckily, after this, the dams that were built, they do have the ladders. Has anyone seen the ladders where you can see the fish that are jumping up? But it took, again, dedicated researchers to look at streams and the ecology and look at the insects and all the fish that were in the area and figure out how can we solve this. So we have constant problem solvers in York County. People were figuring out how to build the mills, but then also how to fix the waters after the mills messed it up.
Well, and it's not only about the fish either. The dams are actually pretty dangerous for people that are out on their boats or just kayaking. Every year there's a couple people that pass away, unfortunately, because they get caught up in the water around the dams.
Yeah.
So I know there is an initiative to go out in York County and look at the dams and see how to make them safer for boaters and fishermen.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
One more.
Okay.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on women's, how they worked on farms and so on, and in the mills? We had one example in the mills.
Sure.
Talk about that.
Sure. When you look at the agriculture history of the family in York County, it was not just the man's job to run the farm. The woman was also a huge part of it. Same with the kids. That's why they had so many kids, right? Because all the kids had a job as well. So the women would mostly be responsible for like the chickens or collecting the eggs, but they also though played a part in butchering. Is anybody a Lewis Miller fan? The paintings from the Chronicler of York County. Next time you're downtown New York, you see all the paintings that they have, the old school murals that are around. Well, that was Lewis Miller, and there is one of my favorite picture of this woman with this is pretty brutal, so sorry if you're in the middle of eating. There's a hog that's hanging, and this woman has this butcher knife, and she's just cutting open the hog. And you don't really think of that as being a feminine job, but it was the 1800s, and the job needed done. And there was a division of labor, of course, so men would usually be responsible for the animals and the plow, things that frankly took a little bit more strength. However, women also were responsible for growing the food in the garden to feed the family, canning the food throughout the winter season. It was a family ordeal. And so the official government didn't recognize them as far as business owners in the tax records.
Right.
And it wasn't until the 19-teens when we see a lot of the suffrage movement that happened across the country, but then also in York County, where we see women gaining more recognition.
Correct. Yeah, just because women weren't mentioned on the official record didn't mean that they weren't doing things
Right.
at home on the farm.
Right.
So.
Anybody garden in here? Gardeners? All right, chicken owners? Butcherers?
Yeah, I was gonna say, does
I see
anyone
a couple
still
of
butcher
you.
their own chickens or livestock? Yeah.
Does anyone can their own food? There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So we still have agriculture that's practiced in York County today. Great. Anyone grow their own flour? Aha! So we need to get back into growing flour.
Maybe the next business that will be here will be another grist mill.
Yeah. So we would love you to continue the conversation with people at your table, maybe review some of the takeaways and just share stories. That's the purpose of Dami and I bringing these out, is just to talk about hometown history and fellowship, and things happen.
Yeah, and I mean, for our first live event, we can't thank you guys enough for coming out tonight. The support means everything because we can't do it without community support. So we're so happy that everyone came out tonight to support us. So
Thank you guys.